Hello and welcome to this episode of the Event Manager Podcast, the podcast for curious event professionals who want to stay ahead of the game by hearing from the leading innovators in the event industry. My name is Miguel Neves and I'm the Editor-in-Chief of EventMB. In this episode titled Real People in Real Places in Real Time, I have the pleasure of speaking with Padraic Gilligan, Managing Partner of Solnua and Chief Marketing Officer of Site Global. We cover a lot of topics around incentive travel and motivational events, including how incentive travel is unique in the way that it starts in the business environment but actualizes in the tourism industry. We talk about how rewarding and recognizing people is crucial to the success of a company. We talk about how incentive travel has evolved to include motivational events. And we talk about why it's important to connect incentive objectives with destinations and to connect incentive participants with people at the destination. And we talk about why a lack of human resources and climate justice are the two big challenges ahead for the event industry. I hope you enjoy listening to this conversation, and I invite you to check out all the other episodes of the Event Manager Podcast with tips and insights from today's most influential event professionals. You can find all the episodes on our website, or you can subscribe through your favorite podcast service.
Now for a word from our sponsors, PHL Life Sciences, a division of the Philadelphia Convention and Visitors Bureau. Host your convention or trade show in Philadelphia, one of America's leading life sciences hubs. PHL Life Sciences, the first and only CVB division of its kind, will connect you to the professionals at the forefront of your industry and to a culture you can only find in Philadelphia. A city known for its rich history that's forging a bright future, Philadelphia challenges the expected and defies convention. A world of discovery is waiting. Visit phllife.com to learn more.
Welcome to this episode of the Event Manager Podcast, and I am joined by the outstanding Padraic Gilligan, Chief Marketing Officer of Site Global and Managing Partner at Solnua. Padraic, thank you for joining us today.
I'm thrilled to be here. It's a great honor.
It's a lot of fun. We haven't caught up in a long time. I mean, we've known each other for a long time, but for those who don't know who you are, could you just introduce yourself and tell us a little bit about your journey to where you are today?
Sure. So my name is Padraic Gilligan, which is always a kind of a talking point. Padraic is Padraic. It's an Irish name. It means Patrick. But unlike my business partner, who also is a Padraic, and who decided that for convenience he'd change his name to Patrick, I never changed, and I've lived with the consequences ever since. So people who know me and know that they know me still struggle, and I can see their eyes kind of making great efforts to try and kind of decipher the collection of letters that they see on my name badge, because they know it's a P sounding word, but how do you say it? But it's Padraic. I always say a dog's paw and a rickshaw. So Padraic is the best way to say it. So who am I? I've been in the event industry since probably since I worked as an Italian-speaking tour guide in the late 80s. Which kind of happened by accident. I was pursuing at the time a career as an academic, believe it or not, doing research into Dante and Samuel Beckett. Dante is a medieval Italian poet, and Samuel Beckett is a Franco-Irish dramatist, poet, and philosopher of the 20th century. So there's a connection between them, believe it or not, and I was determined to make it my life's work to figure out what that connection was. But there was no money in it, and I had a growing family and realized I was going to have to do something else to supplement my meager income as an academic. So I was in my department in University College Dublin, and a call came through to the secretary from the Irish Tourist Board in Milan, who were looking for an interpreter to work with an Italian journalist who was visiting Ireland. I think it was 1987. And I was the only one in the department on that day. So I was asked, would I do it? And I said, sure, I did it. The Italian journalist turned out to be Alberto Moravia. Alberto Moravia is the James Joyce of Italy. He's a absolute, incredibly well-known, highly reputable novelist of the 20th century. He was in his 80s at the time. And when I heard who it was I was going to be actually conducting around Ireland as a tour guide, I was absolutely thrilled. So I spent about 10 days with Alberto Moravia and his entourage, and he wrote a series of articles for the Corriere della Sera, which is an Italian daily about Ireland. And I suppose that became the connection between, I suppose, being a kind of an academic on the one hand, and being somebody who loves being with people and loves talking about his country to people. That became the conduit. And from then on, I kind of realized that there was another world out there that might channel some of the interests that I had, while at the same time perhaps providing a better remuneration at the end of the day than you got as an academic. So that's how it started. I worked as a tour guide during my summer holidays from university, and from school. I was also teaching in a secondary school at the time. And my lifelong friend, Patrick Delaney, who has been a recent guest on this podcast and who recommended me actually to speak on it. Thanks, Pat, for that. Appreciate it. But
he wasn't the only one. Karina Bauer had recommended you already in a previous episode. So you're the first person with 2 recommendations. So you must be very honored.
Oh, that's wonderful to hear. But Patrick had worked for the Irish Tourist Board in the United States for many, many years, and was considering coming back to Ireland with his young, growing family in order to resettle here. And I had kind of moved into an area where there were points of intersection with what he did. So eventually in 1994, we managed to start a company together, which had the name of Delaney Marketing Consultants, which I think Pat explained was an absolute genius moment in his mind, where he realized that Delaney Marketing Consultants made up the 3 letters of DMC, and that's what we were going to be. DMC at the time was actually relatively new as a term in our industry. So it did have a kind of a cachet, and it did have a kind of an interest or a focus to it. The existing DMCs in Ireland weren't too happy when we described ourselves as Ireland's leading DMC, not having operated a single program. But over time, they learned to live with us and we learned to live with them. And so since 1994, I've been in this industry, and having kind of worked previously as a teacher. That's how I got to where I am now.
And so you knew Patrick from before all this? You were kind of friends from childhood? How did that happen?
We're friends since the early 70s. And again, there's a coincidence or a serendipity to that too. Patrick didn't grow up in the same area as I did. We lived actually probably, 10 miles apart in totally different neighborhoods. But Pat knew a boy on my road who was confined to a wheelchair and confined to his house, and used to visit that boy in the 70s. And I used to visit him too. His name was Eddie McCaffrey. And we became friends, as we did with many, many others. This boy was an extraordinary phenomenon, never really left his house, but kind of gathered around them a whole community of people that have become lifelong friends as a result of that. So I think we go back to about 1974.
Great. So that was, the start of the career and the connection with Patrick Delaney. And then you went on to becoming Ovation Group, MCI. It's quite a journey. And I think you are now in the role of Chief Marketing Officer at Site, but you've been involved with Site for a long time. Could you just guide us through, maybe just explain what Site is, why you were involved, and how you became the Chief Marketing Officer?
So SITE is the Society for Incentive Travel Excellence. And in 2023, Miguel, as you probably know, we'll celebrate 50 years on this planet, which is an extraordinary achievement. So SITE goes back to 1973. And SITE became important, I think, in the context of many tourist boards, but in particular the Irish Tourist Board, which was headquartered in New York in the 70s and the 80s. And the Irish Tourist Board identified SITE as an important association to be part of, in terms of finding an audience that would be interested in a destination story that might be a bit different from a normal tour and travel kind of conversation that might take place. So the Irish Tourist Board had a long-standing relationship with SITE. Patrick, when he worked for the Irish Tourist Board, got on the coattails of that and became president of SITE himself in 1991. So it has always been part of our kind of life as an organization, as a company, due to the legacy relationship between our country that we work in, Ireland, and the association, and then also as a result of Pat's own legacy as president of SITE. So it was natural for me to get involved as well. Pat had kind of, blazed the trail through the organization, had been on the board, had become president, and was kind of going into a different relationship with SITE, mainly with the SITE Foundation, when I got involved in 1994. So I was involved in SITE from the beginnings of Delaney Marketing and throughout the 90s. Very involved at different committee level, involved in setting up the chapter in Ireland with Sue Uda and a lot of others at the time. Became chapter president in Ireland, and then Bill Boyd invited me to apply for the board. So I went forward for election to the international board on Bill's recommendation and managed to get elected, served on the board for 6 years, and then became president myself in 2008 with the annual conference taking place that year in Montreux in Switzerland, which was amazing. And then after that, continued to be involved in SITE. It's, in a way, SITE is the voice of the incentive travel professional and the incentive travel profession. And it plays a hugely important role. EIC has done great research over the years with Oxford Economics, and SITE has been always very interested in where does incentive travel fit within that overall research. And triangulating different kind of studies, we've actually devised our own kind of metric. So incentive travel is about $78 billion as of, say, 2018. So it's a significant chunk of change, as they say, in terms of its economic punch on a global basis. However, that only makes it about 8% of the business events industry. Most business events are in the areas of corporate meetings, association conferences, and so on. But when you drill down into the incentive travel bit, what you realize is that, first of all, it's the fastest growing. It's been growing consistently over the last 10 years, obviously COVID accepted. And it's also the sector of the business events industry that probably touches the single biggest number of players on what might be regarded as a tourism and economic spectrum. Insofar as incentive travel originates within a corporation which is seeking to introduce a performance improvement methodology, in relation to sales, in relation to staff and retention, in relation to whatever objective they might have. So it starts very much in the business environment. Mm-hmm. However, its expression is as a tourism activity, insofar as the prize for the qualifiers who reach the incentive travel goal is to have an extraordinary travel experience in a destination. So if you look at the breadth of that on a spectrum, it's incredibly wide. So the number of points that it influences and it impacts is significantly bigger, probably, than the other elements of the business events acronym, which would be the classic MICE that a lot of people don't like to hear. But it's useful because it's meetings, incentives, conferences, events, and certainly from a tourist board and a CVB and a DMO perspective, it is useful because most DMOs are interested in those four elements. It defines what they do. So SITE, we describe ourselves as the eye in mice, and we definitely, I think, have reached that point of reputation and notoriety, if you like, where we can be regarded justifiably as the voice for the incentive travel profession.
I'd be interested to get your take. You mentioned that the Tourism Board of Ireland had a big interest in site and a big interest in incentive travel. Are there kind of specific reasons for that? Is this a site being a sort of North American based organization, and is it to try and attract that North American kind of incentive market, but also is it because Ireland as a destination kind of works well for smaller groups? I assume that most incentive travel is relatively smaller than, I guess, conferences and trade shows and that kind of thing.
I think all of the above, Miguel. I think that's the interesting thing, and probably a large dose of luck and serendipity in there as well. Frequently things happen because people meet in bars, or people meet kind of coincidentally somewhere and have a conversation. And I think SITE was active in North America at a time when the Irish Tourist Board was looking beyond pure tour and travel in terms of the markets that it should be actually tapping into. And I think incentive travel has lots to recommend it to a destination in terms of seasonality. So it's outside of the classic tour and travel season. Regionality, it typically goes to off the beaten track locations and resorts and so on. And then spend, it spends, the spend per head for an incentive travel visitor is probably 4 to 5 times that of a leisure visitor. So there's a huge amount to recommend it. And then bring in the whole sustainability filter, and it makes even more sense. You need fewer incentive travel visitors experiencing very high level destination experiences to generate the same amount of revenue as would come from multiple numbers of leisure. So it does make sense. And I think the Irish Tourist Board realised that even all those decades ago, that this was a particular kind of sector that made sense for our destination. We're a small destination, and we do well. We prosper in that area of small to mid-size incentive travel experiences, because I think they best suit the connectivity that really is at the heart of an incentive travel experience that's truly transformational, that goes beyond just surface level kind of interaction with a destination.
So I'd love you to expand on that a bit more. And I kind of would like to frame it in the sense of, what makes a good incentive trip and what makes a great incentive trip. How do you really create that transformative experience in your mind? What makes a great trip is when you can connect incentive qualifiers with the essence of the destination. And that's... Can you give us an example of something that works well?
I'm working up to it. I need a bit of a runway for this one. But I think if you think of, a typical tour and travel experience involves a kind of a surface level interaction. So you go, you sit in a motor coach and you look out the window and you see the destination when you look out the window, and you appreciate it as, a pretty location or whatever. And then you get off your motor coach, or you get out of your rental car and you go into a visitor attraction, and you're part of a large group that brings you around that visitor attraction and shows you the historical importance of what you're seeing. With incentive travel, you pierce through that surface. That's what incentive travel needs to do. It needs to actually bring a qualifier into what it is that makes the destination unique and special. And a lot of that is going to be mediated in and through the people who live in the destination. So incentive travel, that's, to move it from good to great, is going to always kind of involve connecting with people and stories in destinations, and setting up meaningful dialogue, meaningful connections between the incentive qualifiers and the destination individuals who have those really, really compelling stories to tell. So instead of sitting in a motor coach looking out at the beautiful landscape, a great incentive travel experience will be in that landscape. You will be in that forest. You will be walking on that trail. You will be on a mountain bike going down the side of that hill. But then you'll also be meeting the person who created the mountain bike trail and hearing the story as to how that came about. So you'll always be going beyond the surface, always connecting with something more than just what can be seen, because incentive travel is really true immersion.
That's an excellent description. I think you've definitely done your homework there when it comes to incentive travel, the true immersion. I like that. So how do you explain all this to someone who may not be familiar with incentive travel? I think, larger companies, some companies have incentives sort of built into their structure, but there may be companies that don't and people that aren't really involved in this. How do you kind of bring this concept to people and make them kind of buy into it?
It's a really interesting question, and I think it's one that we all struggle with. Like, how do you tell your grandmother what you do if you're a meeting planner or if you're a planner of incentive travel experiences? Yeah, it's not, and I think one of the things that's one of the sort of the contexts that we need to rely upon is one that we don't really like. We need to rely on that kind of tourism platform or that tourism context to explain what it is we do. And of course, that's very reductive in terms of what incentive travel represents. It's not a tourism activity per se, although undoubtedly there are touristic elements to it. There's no doubt, because it involves visiting a destination as somebody from outside that destination. And that's how we often define tourism. But I think it's a little bit easier within a business context, because everybody understands reward and recognition. And I think more and more as companies get more focused into things like, purpose and meaning and culture, reward and recognition becomes even more important. I think we're all aware of all of those surveys that are conducted particularly with younger members of a workforce, where the things that perhaps, and I spoke about it earlier on when I was talking about my own journey, I said, like, I didn't have enough money, I wasn't earning enough money to bring up my family. Now, money is not the reason why people stay with a particular employer. And that's what the research is telling us very, very clearly. It's something much more. And that's where purpose and meaning and culture comes in. And as part of that, then, in order to be a purposeful company, in order to have meaning, in order to have a vibrant company culture, there needs to be a reward and recognition element built into how the company does its business and how it interacts with its with its people. So within that context, it's easy to talk about incentive travel, because, so how do I reward and recognize somebody? Well, I can give them cash, I can give them a merchandise gift, or I can give them something that money can't buy, which is a transformative experience. And that's where we want incentive travel to be seen. We want incentive travel to be understood as that money can't buy experience that ultimately kind of creates memories that are deep and lasting, and that connect people with other people, and ultimately perhaps with the work environment that out of which the incentive travel experience was generated in the first instance. So I think, to explain that, what I do is I help companies generate the ultimate reward and recognition programs for the people that are crucial to their success. I think that becomes a good starting point to explain what incentive travel is.
Okay, and this, I mean, it normally is a sales team kind of incentive? Is that the normal use of it, or are there other good examples of kind of recognizing and rewarding other teams within companies?
Yeah, I think that has been the traditional focus for incentive travel. But what we've seen, Site Foundation conducts research on an annual basis with two other partners who are also associations in this industry, FICP and IRF. And what we've seen with the Incentive Travel Industry Index is that the key focus of success for an incentive travel experience is less the return on financial objectives that are actually generated and more the return on soft objectives. So the fostering of relationships, the connections between officers and employees, the reinforcement of a company ethos, and so on. Mm-hmm. And I think what's emerging now, particularly in the context of diversity, equity, and inclusion, companies are now asking, well, hold on a second, is this fulfilling our equity focus if we create an elite program that only rewards the top qualifying individuals? Should we not be doing something more generic? Should we not be doing more of a trip that actually brings everybody together? So I think some companies are doing that. And I was interested during the lockdown to read about companies who had decided to divert all of the budget that they had put into real estate and into essentially kind of creating, permanent work environments for their people. They were taking budget out of that and instead putting it into the creation of a quarterly company trip where the entire workforce would be brought together on a social basis and connected with each other on the basis that, this working from home thing for them was continuing to work very, very well. It was working very, very well for their employees. But the missing piece was the connections that happen in the live environment. So, okay, let's do that on a regular basis by just bringing people together in a location. And there were numerous articles, I think certainly your own organization published many of them, Miguel, which highlighted that as a new emerging trend within our industry. And incentive travel, or let's say a variation of incentive travel, a redefined incentive travel, is exactly the mechanism that can allow that particular behavior to happen in a very, very effective way.
Would you say then that we need a new name for incentive travel? Because it sounds like maybe the incentive part of it is outdated in some situations, right?
It's brilliant. And yes, we already have it. Like we are increasingly referring to incentive travel as incentive travel and motivational events. So the motivational events takes into account the that missing piece, because incentive travel is a very, very specific, a very, very specifically defined form of behavior modification or performance enhancement in an organization that involves a whole kind of series of events over a period of time that leads eventually to the qualifiers going to a destination. But a key element in it is that the cost of the entire trip is actually covered by the incremental revenue that's generated in and through the incentive contest. So it is a highly defined and understood concept. And I think adding in motivational events gives that broader perspective of travel and events as a mechanism that allows us to foster relationships, build culture, and do all of those soft power things that are increasingly important for companies.
And from the companies kind of organizing what is traditionally called incentive travel, does it change anything? Do you feel like the activities or the way you conduct and recognize people within the activities changes if it's more of like a general motivational department-wide trip?
It definitely does. I remember years ago, like as a DMC, I think it was, the late 90s. I remember running a program for a US, I think they were car dealers, and the meeting planner had taken instructions, obviously, from the client, and the client had instructed that all of the officers of the company would be given suites in the hotel, and they were kind of seated together at dinner functions apart from the actual qualifiers. And I remember thinking at the time, this is a little bit odd. Do you know, if this is supposed to be an experience that brings everybody together, why would you actually divide people in that particular way and create a kind of an apartheid between those who are the officers in the company and those who have simply qualified for the trip? And sure enough, like I don't think I've ever seen it again, but it was a practice. And I expect it was a practice that needed to be examined and interrogated and changed, because incentive travel needs to implement design elements that actually foster connections rather than foster division. So certainly now, a lot of the programs that you will see, if there's a seating plan, you will have the CEO at a table, you'll have the CFO at a different table, you'll have the CMO somewhere else, but they will all be actively engaging and connecting with the qualifiers on the basis that everybody understands. Without the qualifiers, the company is not making the profits that it has made. So they're the important ones, not the officers.
It does sound, and maybe you can confirm on your end, that incentive travel and the activities around it and the way you conduct it has developed quite a lot as we understand motivation in the workforce, and as traditions and the way we work in offices and in organizations has changed over the last few years. There must be a reflection of that in incentive travel as well.
There is. And again, we called it out in one of our research programs over the last couple of years. We had a kind of a catchphrase that incentive travel used to be about hard dollars. Now it's about soft power. And that's how we're seeing programs being designed to promote the soft power element. The hard dollars are always welcome. So if you can generate a bottom line that's positive as a result of an incentive travel experience, all the better. But it's no longer the sole focus of the trip in a way that it would have been back in the 70s and the 80s.
Are you ready to celebrate your successes in the world of meetings and events? The Skift Meetings Awards are back for 2024, recognizing the most innovative business events companies across 15 categories, and we want you to be a part of it. Winners will feature on Skift Meetings, sending a clear signal to events professionals around the world that these are partners they can rely on. The final deadline for submissions is June 11th. We encourage you to start your submission today to secure the best entry rates. For more information and to start your submission, head to live.skift.com.
So, I mean, last couple of years, COVID pandemic, fingers crossed, we are recording this in early April 2022. Things are looking positive, but it's been a pretty dark period for incentive travel, pretty dark period for the whole industry. But I think particularly incentive travel, a lot of kind of things just went on pause for a little while. Could you just take me quickly, without trying to get too negative, through that and kind of, what you're seeing now and what makes you kind of really look at it in a positive light now?
Well, I think, the pandemic was catastrophic. There's no two ways about it for the industry in so many different ways. And I think it kind of called into question a lot of the relationships that were at the heart of our industry. And when I say called into question, I mean probably in a positive way. I think a lot of buyers of incentive travel experience realized that because they could rely on relationships with their suppliers, they were able to save a lot of money in cancellation charges, in all of the negative aspects, the negative financial aspects of having kind of, confirmed something and then needing to unconfirm it because you weren't able to actually activate it. And, with, I'd say, a few small exceptions, in most cases, relationships are stronger now as a result of the pandemic because of the way that people worked together. So that's one thing that has happened. The other thing that needs to be said, Miguel, is that the incidence of activation of incentive travel programs around the world has not been consistent at all. And in the United States in particular, incentive travel programs were activated in 2020 and in 2021 in ways that they probably weren't in Europe. So what we lost pretty much immediately was we lost international programs. So an American company staging an event in Italy, that just didn't happen. A German company staging an event in Thailand, that didn't happen. But what gradually returned, and I say gradually, but it was quickly enough in the United States. There was kind of a refocus on domestic, which continues. And international programs did operate, but not in an international destination, in a domestic destination. And we saw a lot of our US incentive houses were able to kind of reaccommodate programs at short notice in domestic locations. In some cases, the domestic locations were within driving distance of the majority of where the qualifiers were living. So it actually kind of, it got as local as that in some cases. So that's the first thing. It didn't disappear. It didn't disappear the way that international disappeared. And that's important because it creates a kind of a continuity. And it creates a continuity, I think, in program activation as well, because incentive programs are launched this year for delivery next year. We have an interesting situation in 2022 because most DMCs around the world are off the charts busy at the moment because they're delivering 2020 programs and 2021 programs in addition to 2022 programs in 2022. And that's created a kind of a massive congestion. It'll be interesting to see how it pans out in 23 and 24. But certainly the research is showing us that incentive travel is back. It's back domestically. It's back regionally as well. And in some cases, it's back internationally. Long haul is probably a little bit further down the line before it will recover. I think psychologically people still have issues about being so far away from home as, maybe a 12-hour flight or a 15-hour flight. So I don't think we'll see long haul until maybe 24, 25. But certainly while it was catastrophic for our industry is very resilient. And we did find ways to operate even in 2020 at that kind of local level.
So just a kind of a curious question in some sense, this going local, does this, are there challenges there in terms of motivation that, that amazing trip, there's that allure of doing something that you normally wouldn't do or going to a destination that's a little bit maybe out of your budget or something. Did that bring challenges, and how did you kind of overcome that and kind of make the local trips more attractive? Is there a sort of general thread around that?
I think that's where the dark art of marketing comes in, Miguel, really. Like obviously, I think when we think of bucket list experiences, we always think of Table Mountain, the Great Wall of China, Iguazu Falls. We think of these kind of iconic pictures that we've seen, and we want to go there. It's a little bit kind of more challenging to think of something that's in your own backyard as having the same sort of transformative or potentially transformative impact on you. But I think that's where the incentive travel community has had to really extend itself from a marketing and a promotions perspective, and find ways of telling stories about local experiences that made them truly compelling. And I don't think, I remember having a discussion with somebody about languages. I'm an Italian speaker, as I said earlier on, and I know French and I can understand Spanish and Portuguese because they're kind of similar, but I don't understand Slav languages. And when I listen to them, they don't appeal to me in the same way as the beautiful mellifluous tones of a Latin language appeal. I remember somebody saying, all languages are beautiful when you speak them. You know, all languages are beautiful when you understand them. And I think it's exactly the same with destination experiences. You know, and a lot of us during the millennium discovered our own neighborhoods in new ways, because, like, you know, in Ireland, we were limited to a 2 kilometer kind of radius from our home for periods of the lockdown. I discovered highways and byways in my own locality that I didn't know existed, and, you know, developed a new relationship with my own neighborhood. And I think that is also possible for incentive travel experiences. And the only limit we have is the limit of our own imagination. And I think that's the space that marketeers live in. And I think it's finding ways of mediating the novelty, the innovation, and the beauty of a local experience is the challenge, but it can be done.
Yeah, absolutely. Is there an opportunity there for sustainability and kind of getting people to connect more with the local community, kind of helping them do that in ways that maybe they weren't doing before as a business and also as individuals?
It's also the justification for doing it, isn't it? You know, like, if we're serious about sustainability, well, then we should be actually making purposeful decisions in relation to how far we're traveling and how we're traveling to access those particular experiences. So yes, there's the whole sustainability issue in relation, say, to to climate justice, climate change, and making sure that our travel is responsible travel in terms of, you know, carbon emissions and stuff like that. And then there's the sustainability story in terms of contributing to local communities and making sure that, you know, we're charitable at home as well as being charitable abroad. So yeah, very definitely.
Yeah, and I was referring more to that cultural and kind of social side of things. I think there's lots of opportunities there that I think sometimes are missed when we focus on long haul and kind of the grandiose kind of big targets and big trips like that.
Exactly. Very definitely. I agree with that.
So wanted to touch a little bit on kind of innovation. Where do you see innovation happening in incentive travel? And I guess we've talked about a little bit about this. Is there any kind of technology that's really interesting that's being used in incentive travel? And it doesn't have to be technology. I mean, innovation can take many forms. But what kind of innovation are you seeing in this particular sector?
Well, I think the innovation that we've just actually discussed, in other words, kind of turning thought processes on their head and asking people to think local and see beauty in local and see motivation and inspiration in a local or a domestic experience, as opposed to believing that the only way travel can be motivational is when it's getting on a plane and, you know, going for 12 hours to see something that you've seen a picture of on your kind of TV screen. I think that's a really important innovation. And I think with the whole climate justice thing, it will become more and more important. I don't think that travel will go away. In other words, and when you look at the actual impact of travel itself on carbon emissions, it's not as extensive as perhaps it might appear at all. But I do think that it will be more purposeful, and I do think it will be more intentional. We won't just get on a plane. We'll get on a plane having kind of considered all of the implications of that, and having laid off whatever needs to be laid off by way of recompense for what is actually happening in terms of kind of the way that's done. So there will be innovation, I think, in terms of incentive travel and choices of destinations. When it comes to technology, I think, you know, we saw some great innovation during the pandemic years where we were able to continue to select destinations because technology has come to the fore that allows a site inspection to take place, through a dedicated platform that links together different elements in a destination. In fact, one of our winners in the Site Crystal Awards, actually, maybe I shouldn't say this yet, but this, in case this goes out before the Crystal Awards, but we do have a winner in the Crystal Awards, so I won't name what it is. That is all centered around innovation and technology and enabling site inspections to take place virtually. Now, I think that's a wonderful thing because, if you can cut down on 2 or 3 trips to a destination because you can now do it over Zoom, you're saving a huge amount of time and you're saving a huge amount of carbon emissions as well. So I think that's very, very good. But ultimately, I suppose, insofar as, innovation is often associated with technology. Technology will always have a limited application in an activity that is fundamentally about real people in real places in real time. Like, that's the trinity really of what incentive travel is about. It's real people in real places in real time. You take out one of those and something very significant is missing from the experience. So technology will be an enabler, but it won't replace anything, because it's just contrary to the definition of what it is we're trying to achieve.
Yep, that makes a lot of sense. I think I'd love to kind of get from you also your look towards the future. What do you see as kind of big challenges ahead? Obviously, kind of recovering the pandemic is not sorted. There's a compression that you've already talked about of incentive houses doing work of 3 years, maybe in 1 year. What do you see that the biggest challenges in the next few years, and how do you see companies addressing it, or how are you trying to help companies address that?
I think there's a variety of different challenges. I'll start with resources, with human resources. The phrase, the great resignation. I think we've seen a great resignation from our industry. Huge numbers seem to have migrated into tech in particular. I think the tech world love people from a hospitality background because we have a great customer focus, which is not necessarily the seminal characteristic of technology. So if they can get people who know how to deal with people, that's a wonderful thing. So I know in our own destination here in Ireland, we've lost huge numbers of absolutely brilliant people to tech. And, what tech gives them is more money and probably a better kind of work-life balance. So they are the two things that are going to challenge us. We have traditionally been an industry where the remuneration thing is not equitable throughout the entire kind of spectrum of people who are involved in it. So that needs to be addressed in some way. And second of all, we're not an industry that's known for work-life balance. And when I say work-life balance, I don't think anybody has a problem about working intensely over a period of time, or I don't think people have a problem not being in a 9-to-5 environment or working on a weekend. I think it's the recompense. So if I work 5 days in a row, including a weekend, will I have time off to recover? And having been a leader in the DMC world, I know that we struggled with that on the basis that there wasn't the time to recover because there was another program coming down the line. So I think we were all, there's a momentum there that is almost a vicious circle. So we are a relatively kind of low paying environment. So we have to have lots of activity in order to actually generate the levels of income necessary to sustain a company and then to pay individuals in that company. So that just keeps going around and round. If people were paid more, if we charged more and people were paid more for individual programs, well, then we would have to do fewer of them in order to actually achieve those same levels of profitability. So I think that's a big problem. I think we need to address that. I don't know how it can be addressed, but it is a problem. And, certainly I'm seeing it with my own eyes here, where people are literally, going in their droves because they're offered more money and a better work-life environment. So that's one thing that we're going to have to actually deal with. I think climate justice is going to be a big issue for us over the next number of years. I remember talking to Karina a number of years ago when there were lots of other issues impacting on our industry. And I remember Karina saying, these issues we'll get over, but the one that we're not discussing now that's going to actually completely hamstring us is the whole issue of climate justice. And I think that's true as well. So I've already said something about that, so I won't go into too much detail on it, but I do believe that we need to respond to it. I think our travel there needs to be a greater intentionality and purposefulness around our travel. In other words, when we're going somewhere, we need to know exactly why. And it needs to not just be because it's a good destination to go to. I think when we go places, we'll go places because that particular destination fulfills a variety of different requirements that we have as an organization. And those requirements inevitably will stretch from the financial side right over to the social side. So I think at the heart of our industry, Miguel, I think there is a big kind of there is a big challenge, insofar as we are incentive travel. So, we are travel, and travel at the moment has issues that it needs to deal with. Now, I kind of firmly believe that the benefits of interacting with destinations are greater than the cost of interacting with destinations. I frequently quote that wonderful phrase by Mark Twain, how travel is the enemy of bigotry. I think travel experiences are transformative because they make us more tolerant. They make us more understanding. They help us look each other in the eye. They help us understand, different ways of doing things. And I think that's crucial for everybody. Staying in their own country is not good. It's not good in terms of the world that we actually live in. So travel enables tolerance and understanding and mutual respect. So it absolutely needs to happen. It's just too costly for the environment. So we need to kind of come up with ways of actually dealing with that.
Yeah, that intentionality, as you mentioned, and
kind
of focus. Related to this, just kind of quickly, is there any one particular thing in the industry that if you could have a magic wand and kind of instantly change that you would use your magic wand on?
It used to always upset me, Miguel, that we were such conspicuous consumers with huge amounts of waste. Over the years, I've kind of seen programs where, there would be very lavish buffets laid on that would not even be half impacted on by the people who actually were present at the event. And, that food inevitably would be just discarded. Now, I think we've come up with great initiatives over the years in terms of doing better in relation to waste, but I still think there's a lot of waste. And I still think there's a lot of, and it's not just waste in terms of, food, and it's waste in terms of resources as well. I would like us to be a more efficient industry than we are at the moment. I think there are far too many levels involved in decision-making processes. Everybody has somebody who's responsible for something. So on a typical incentive travel experience, you will have the client, you will have the incentive house, you will have the DMC, you will have the hotel, and all are responsible for the same thing often. I think that's a kind of an over exaggeration of resources that really needs to be sorted out as well. So that would be my thing, that we would just be more efficient and less conspicuous in our consumption.
I think that's excellent points there, and it's very interesting that you talk about the decisions as well, not just the actual food waste. I mean, of course, that's a decision to put on a massive buffet and to staff for X number of people, but it's still decisions at all levels impact that. Brilliant. Really enjoyed chatting, Padraic. I think this is a fantastic conversation. I know that the Site Global Conference is happening very, very soon, and you're very, very busy preparing for that. Give us a little bit of a short preview about what's happening, because this podcast will be out in the next few days, so there may still be time for people to register. So I wondered if you could set the scene for that.
Fantastic. A free commercial. That's great. So Dublin, the 20th till the 23rd of April. So that's kind of coming up within the next kind of 2.5 weeks. We have well over 400 people signed up at the moment, and still registrations coming in every day. It's 3 days and a couple of days then in advance for chapters and individual site members who are part of other programs and so on. But it's a 3-day immersion in Dublin. We've got social events in the Guinness Storehouse, beautiful gala event sponsored by our great friends in IMEX in the Convention Centre in Dublin, and then a final night in the Museum of Literature Ireland, this being the 100th anniversary of the publication of James Joyce's Ulysses. It's a very apt location to be for that. Mm-hmm. There'll be lots of stories that we're telling on the stage and informally throughout the entire event. We've got some amazing speakers. Huge amount of peer-to-peer activity, and it's always been a characteristic of Site, and I think a really, really powerful way of getting takeaways that you can actually use in your own company is hearing other people in their companies and what they've done. And Absolutely. Then we've got a digital day on the Monday, which is 2 days after the event itself. We have a lot of the content from the event that we'll be relaying to a digital audience around the world. So really looking forward to that.
And so there's a digital or an online registration that you can pay for that if you want?
Yeah, and we're launching that this very day.
Oh, very good.
Yeah.
And is there a sort of hot topic or key theme that you think is kind of permeating throughout the conference?
The theme is dare. And I think, we feel that it's a very apt theme for the times that we're in. They're daring times. And we think that people who dare to do things differently will be the ones that will prevail and prosper and do exceptionally well. And we want to encourage the incentive travel community all over the world to dare to think big, think differently. So that's our core theme, and we're excited about that.
Sounds like a good and very apt core theme for this year. Last question for you. Who should we have next on the podcast? Of course, you were recommended by 2 people already, so it would be great to get your recommendation as well.
And I don't know if this person has already been recommended, but so if this person has been recommended, I do have another one that I can suggest. But the one that I actually thought of is my great friend Tahira Endian, who is
She was the second person on the podcast, actually.
All right, okay. So then I'll change for that, and I will recommend Karen Bollinger, who is in Melbourne. Well, actually, she's just moving from Melbourne, but she's Australian. Mm-hmm. She has been in the world of business events as a leader on the DMO side for many, many years, and then as an officer in PCMA. And I had the pleasure of working with Karen on a consultancy project recently, and was just absolutely thrilled to interact with the great mind that she is, and the great heart that she is. So I would highly recommend Karen. She's a force to be reckoned with, and a great person and spokesperson for our industry.
Brilliant. Thank you for that recommendation. Padraic, it's been an absolute pleasure. I'm going to let you go and we wrap up the podcast. Thank you so much for being with us and best of luck with the Site Global Conference. It sounds like an excellent event. I can't wait to hear more about it.
Thanks, Miguel. All the best. Bye-bye now.
Thank you for listening to this edition of the Event Manager Podcast. Please subscribe and rate the podcast wherever you get your podcasts. For the latest news and the best articles on technology and innovation in the event industry, head over to eventmb.com.